Well, hello there, everyone. To catch everyone up on what was happening. Myself, James, and Tom were all going to basically disappear, go off the grid, so that ER, aka Earth Restoration, couldn't find us. Now, we did get a shuttle for some of the way, at least getting to the correct vicinity. My brother was one of the lucky ones who was managed to be evacuated away from Earth. I hadn't seen him in years. He was the first to leave home. Despite him being a couple of years younger than me, I guess he saw right through my parents, or should I say our parents, and left them as soon as he could, never really looking back. I would not say this side to our parents until much later on. Maybe because I was pissed out of my mind at the time. He was making just about as much money as I was spending every night when I went to the pub. Okay, that's a bit of exaggeration. I didn't go every night. I couldn't afford to go every night. And I haven't actually been to a pub in over a year. I still do have the odd drink, but in moderation. Not even the Omicron virus that's slowly killing me has put me back on my alcoholism. And believe me, it is very, very tempting. But anyway, as I was saying, rather than getting, shuttle after shuttle directly there, we were going to make a large chunk, or as much as possible, of the journey by train. And this was an old-fashioned type train. Basically, no tracking, no Wi-Fi, no nothing, very primitive, making it a lot harder to track. The only way you'd be able to track this train is if you placed a tracer on it yourself, or tracked it visually, which made it perfect for what we wanted it for. And the rest of the way we will be driven in an equally primitive car. It all seems simple enough, that was the plan. Though unfortunately things happened on that journey beyond our control. And, well, let me just say it made it the most memorable train journey that I've ever taken. It might be the only train journey that James has ever taken. Oh, and let's not forget little Sarah. And actually, something I did before I left, I say before I left, on literally the way there, is I purchased a pushchair. You think I would have thought of this beforehand and bought one well in advance? I mean, I did get a cot, but a pushchair was just something I didn't really think of. Though, despite not thinking of a pushchair, somehow a papoose came into my mind. Yeah, I'm not sure how that works. How the hell did papoose come to my mind before a pushchair? Maybe it was those weird adult ones that I saw in a pawn shop once. Except one person who was in the papoose would be held upside down, so that the person who was stood the right way up would get some nice, lovely whiffs of the person's arse, while the other person will presumably slowly fall unconscious from all the blood rushing to their head. Oh well, if they were going to use it for sex, at least they were only going to use it for a short period of time, so I guess they won't pass out in that length of time. Unless they started role-playing, in which case, I'd hate to think. But anyway, we arrived at the station. It was very old and pretty decrepit. It looked like it hadn't been used in a millennia. It was utterly falling to bits. There was mould on the walls, and on one of them I swear I even saw moss. Still though, by some miracle, this thing was still functional as a train station. I didn't dare sit in the seats, and had to forcefully deter James from sitting in them, as rather than just being, a traditional either wooden, metal or plastic seat, these ones were wooden, but they also had a padded layer on, which had an awful smell, and clearly had gathered mould and who knows what else over the years. My only thought was to burn the seat, never mind sit in it. But James was desperate for a sit down, despite just coming off a shuttle, where he was sitting on his backside, and even said that could he sit in the pushchair and have Sarah on his lap. I said to him, "No, you lazy bugger. You're in your youth, the prime of your life, just like I am. Therefore you should be able to stand for at least 5 minutes. We then looked to the left and saw a bright yellow glow in the distance coming closer, the rattling and chugging of the train tracks, meeting with the wheels of the train. The train then finally pulled in. This train was completely black. If it wasn't for the light at the front and the windows, it would completely blend in with the cover of darkness that had surrounded it. I couldn't tell if the train was actually black or whether it was just utterly filthy like the station. Either way, when the doors opened, the inside looked, well, not amazing, but in comparison to the station, it looked bloody immaculate. Tom stepped on first and helped me to lift the pushchair on. James then followed behind, closing the door behind him. After a couple of minutes of waiting, the train began to move, and an unforgettable journey would begin. The train journey would prove to be a long one. For the first half hour, everything was pretty normal and typical. I had booked us in the first class section, and we were guided to, well, basically a room. It had 3 fold-out beds, a self-assembly cot, and some padded chairs underneath the fold-out beds. It was pretty nice and pretty luxurious. And despite my comments on the outside of the train, the inside was pretty nice. Very pristine and clean. Though, mind you, it's better bloody be for the money I paid for it. Works overall, it was pretty comfortable enough. Works, as I said, for the first half hour, nothing of which particularly happened. The 3 of us kind of just sat in the chairs and chatted, while I allowed Sarah to crawl around the floor and play with a few cuddly toys that I'd brought her. James quickly lost interest and started playing on his Switch. He did dip in and out of the conversation though. He did ask me about my brother, stuff like what is he like, and stuff like that. I told him he was, from what I remember, a pretty decent brother. Unlike myself, who was the very confident, or overconfident, and very loud, shall we say. He was, well, not shy, but unwilling to confront people about things. He was more of the person who would like to blend in with the crowd, where I was the one who wanted to stand out. But still, we got along fine enough. The thing is, we were just never really close enough. During my first year of being an artist impressionist, I don't remember him ever contacting me once. And if he did, then I must have either not known or simply forgot about it or ignored it. Some people do ask me about those days, and to be honest, I don't remember a lot about it. I was pissed out of my mind most of the time, and I was taking pills to help me sleep and pills to help me stay awake. Were there good times? Sure, probably. Though if there were, I can't remember them particularly. So in the end, what was the point of it all? But anyway, after this half an hour, the train seemed to be normal at first. But then there was a jerk, as it seemed to move to the left-hand side a bit too much. And then suddenly, we were all thrown out of our seats. Apart from James, who, unfortunately, I landed on, as the train came to a brisk stop. As our seats were nearest to the train driver, I decided to go and ask him what on earth was happening. As I went, however, I found that the door to where the driver would reside had been broken open. There was also what was obviously the trace of blood on the other side of it. I took a look behind me as I slowly made my way into the room. There, on the floor, I saw the train driver, dead, with the engineer lying beside him. Although the engineer was pretty badly beat up, he was still alive. I bent over beside him. and asked him what had happened. He told me that someone had broken through the right side window and kicked the driver as they entered, which caused the train to initially jerk. The driver then immediately slammed on the brakes. There was a struggle where the masked individual had knocked the engineer to the floor and bashed the train driver's head against the door before finally stomping on the train driver's head as he hit the floor. The masked figure then had forced the door open. This made me immediately enter a phase of shock and panic. All of this had only happened seconds before I got there. It was a wonder I didn't pass this masked individual. I then saw one of the staff finally enter. I saw that they were about to shout the train down, but then I quickly got up and covered their mouth. I told them to be quiet, as the perpetrator was still about, and we didn't want to exactly be alerting them, especially considering they would still be in the vicinity. The train staff member nodded and agreed. He then used his radio to contact another member of staff, who was presumably the train's medic, to come to the engineer's aid. I was then instructed to go back to my seat and remain there until further notice, and to not tell the other passengers yet. So I went back to my room on the train. Tom asked what was wrong, whereas James had gone back to his switch. I took a breath and then quietly told them what had happened. It immediately made James drop his switch as he got off of his feet to look out of the window, then to the other side to look through the window in the door of the room. I could tell he was on edge, and to be honest, he had every right to be. There was a murderer on this train, and for all intents and purposes they were still there. True, they could have left, but I had a feeling that they still would be here. Obviously, there was the possibility that the train driver was the target, and hey-oh, mission accomplished, they get to go, and everyone else at least gets to live. Though that seems highly implausible and highly unlikely. After all, if the train driver was the target, then why murder them on the train? After all, an engineer will be present, and the train would also be moving, so there's the risk that the murderer could also do damage to themselves. And also it's a lot more likely that you'll have a ton more witnesses if you make enough noise and don't get away enough quickly. No, the target was someone else. Immediately I had the suspicion that it could be me, or Tom. Could someone have found out? I was curious. Who were the other passengers on the train? I hadn't really bothered to check. The rest of them just kind of phased into the background when you were boarding. Plus, what about the people that got on at previous stops? Tom made a wise suggestion that for once we actually do what the people in authority tell us. We stay in our room until told to otherwise. After all, if there is a murderer, then at least here we would stand a chance. Because other than the door, the only other way to get in would be to smash through the outside window, which we knew our happy-go-lucky murderer could do. So this meant we just had to keep an eye on the door and the outside window. After all, there was two of us against him, and if needs be, James could always jump on him. Plus, thanks to Tom being basically a cyborg, he now had incredible strength. I picked up Sarah off the floor and agreed with Tom that that is what we would do. In the past, I might have been willing to risk my own life. Heck, even Tom's a lot of the time. And, dear old Billy, bless him. But I wasn't risking my children's. After all, they were perfectly innocent from all of this. For we knew we weren't even the targets. But without a list of passengers, we couldn't really fathom who it could else be. And who was the masked figure anyway? We figured that it probably wasn't someone from ER. After all, this job seemed to be pretty professional. The masked figure was able to break in, murder the train driver, and leave the engineer lying on the floor and able to escape and get away in a matter of seconds before I even arrived. So that left them off the list. I mean, true, unless they got a specialised member, but that did seem highly unlikely. It did also seem that the perpetrator was working alone, as if it was a group organisation or even gang, then it would have been more likely they would have sent in more than just one member. and would have maybe done a cleaner job or left some sort of calling card. No, he put it on a level of professionalism, but on an independent sort of way. The question was, how were they able to break through a window? On a moving train of all things. While I was discussing this with Tom, James saw something dangling outside the window. He quickly pointed it out to me. I told him to stay away. As I edged forward, I saw what it was. It was a piece of rope, but not just any rope, strong rope. The kind that you'd use in climbing equipment or something like that. So it was possible that either the masked figure was on the train the whole time and got out at some stage and used the rope as a sort of safety line in case they fell off the train, or they were out there the entire time and probably got on at some station and then just waited for the right point. After all, by this point, we were effectively just in the middle of nowhere. Before, we were passing through some sort of civilization, but now we were thoroughly away from all that, so it would be the perfect point to kill people. After all that we could see for miles and miles were just empty fields, and with the cover of darkness, well, this seemed utterly perfect. Tom and myself did seem to deduce that perhaps maybe we weren't the targets after all. After all, if the murderer did intend to kill us, then they would have known that we were on the train. And surely they probably would have found out where our seats were, so when I got out to go investigate, then that would have been the perfect time for them to kill me, and if Tom was also the target, jump him and kill him as well. Or even if that wasn't the case, why had no more attempts been made? The lack of information was killing me, just eating away at me. I wanted to know what was happening on the outside. I wanted to go out and investigate, though I had to keep convincing myself to stay put. Even though I knew Tom was absolutely capable of looking after Tom and Sarah, in fact a lot of the time probably more capable than I am, I still didn't want to risk it. Plus I knew we'd stand a better chance anyway if I was there. And what if the murderer was out there and I just got in their way? If I got killed, then who would they have then? Sarah's mum had recently abandoned her, and James's mum had died. Who would look after them then? Well, I'm sure Tom would probably volunteer. As for my brother, we hadn't even gotten to meet him yet, so I had no idea if he was still like I remembered him. He could be an utter dickhead for all I knew. So no, that settled it, I was staying. It wasn't worth the risk, but curiosity does eat away at you. Curiosity may have killed the cat, though cannibalism killed the Scarborough. Which was I to be? To be honest, I hope I never find out. We all stood waiting tensely. We all stood slightly away from the centre from the room, so that we could not be seen so easily by passers-by, making sure though to keep away from the door and the window, just in case an unexpected visitor decided to jump in. We remained like this in utter silence, for at least a good 5 minutes. We heard noises as people were presumably walking about. Then James whispered into my ear, "I think I hear something." "Hear what?" It sounds like it's coming from the engine room." I pricked up my ears myself, and sure enough, I heard what sounded like a beeping. I then quickly turned to look at Tom. We both suddenly realised what it was. Tom thrust open the door and told James to run ahead of us. Then me, as I was holding Sarah, then finally himself. The beeping began to get louder and faster, until suddenly the device that was making the beeping finally exploded. It managed to take the engine room, our room, and the room beside it. When the smoke cleared, we found the corpses of the 2 occupants who were in the room next to us. They had presumably been just sitting there staying put, as they were told, and now they were dead. By the looks of things, it wasn't the actual explosion itself that caused their demise, but the weight of the roof of the train falling on top of them. I then remembered I still had my USB communicator in case of emergencies. I didn't want to use it before, as there could be a slim chance that someone will be able to track the signal. But it had gone far beyond that, so I wasn't willing to risk it anymore. I took it out from my ankle pocket. Unfortunately, the signal appeared to be blocked. This was odd and strange. How was the signal being blocked? And where was it being blocked from? I also reached down and grabbed my gun. I told Tom that we had to find somewhere else, somewhere more safe. Tom suggested that we just stay put where we are, though then I quickly reminded him how that had gone just before. He then agreed that we should keep moving, at least for now. I asked Tom to go first. After all, he was the strongest, and we may need him to defend us. James would go in the middle, and I would bring up the rear, with my gun held up at all times. I put Sarah in the papoose that I'd managed to grab before running out of our room. I then placed the papoose upon myself, and we began walking down the remainders of the carriages. Now that the train was now cut off from the engine room completely, that also took the lights with it, as they no longer had a power supply. However, by luck, there was an emergency torch on the wall at the side of the carriage. Tom removed it and turned it on. It was a pretty dim torch. It was only barely good enough to see in front of us, by a few feet. I could, of course, use my phone. However, it would be far too bright, and it would alert everyone of our location, so we decided to stick to the torch. Tom then asked me how come I didn't notice any explosives when I was in the engine room before. I said to him I didn't hear any beeping, so that meant one of two things. Either our masked murdering figure had them activated by remote control, or set on a time delay, and I just simply hadn't noticed them, or they went back there. After all, when we ran out, there was no staff about, which did seem odd, until Tom nearly tripped up. He then shone the light at the floor, revealing the train staff member who I'd spoken to. His throat had been completely slit, and by the looks of it, he'd maybe tried to pull away, but whoever had slit his throat had grabbed on and partially pulled his face off. It almost looked like he was wearing a hood over his head. I knelt down beside the body. I then looked up at James and Tom and said, "Please don't judge me for what I'm about to do." I placed my finger on the bloodied remains of his face and then proceeded to lick the blood off my finger. Tom asked me what the point of that was. I then told him, "This didn't happen recently. He's been dead for at least 10 minutes, as all the oxygen out of the blood seems to have gone, at least in this part." Tom then asked me how on earth I knew that. I then admitted to him that I knew the different taste if blood was oxygenated or deoxygenated. It was a handy way in knowing that how long he'd been dead for roughly. I knew it couldn't be more than 10 minutes, because that was the last time I spoke to him. So presumably he walked along the carriage and had been taken by behind. Maybe it was too late for him to warn anyone else. Unfortunately, for now, there was nothing I could do, or anyone else. The only thing I could is I pulled the flesh of his face back onto his head, so at least it looked more presentable, I think is the word for it. We then began to hear a banging from the room that we were beside. Obviously, our first thought was it was a masked murderer. However, without thinking, Tom broke down the door with brute force, though what we found inside was the least expected thing I would ever expect to see. Inside the room, tied up and gagged so that they couldn't cry out for help, was Spix McKendry. I removed the gag as Tom pinged him against the wall. He then immediately proceeded to thank me. "Thank you, Mr. Doncaster. I didn't know how long I'd be here for, but thank you for coming to my rescue." "Okay, really, cut the shit this time. I don't have time to be standing around here talking to you. What the fuck are you doing here?" "I was called here." "By whom? The fairies?" "I was told that there would be information about your associate, Marvis." "Yeah, well, there's not. And to be quite frank, you'll be really lucky to get away with your life from this, you know." "Anyway, who tied you up?" "I have no idea.
They were cloaked and masked. I'd been in here for about half an hour.
Yeah, well, you gazette. Wait. How long did you say you've been in here?
Half an hour. It's been most unpleasant.
No, that doesn't make sense.
What do you think I tied myself up?
No. The half an hour part. Are you sure?
It happened when we went through the tunnel, which was, by my estimations, roughly half an hour ago.
Dad, I'd hate to say it, but he's right.
You should listen to your son. Maybe he has more sense than you do. Okay, just shut up.
Alright, you may be right about the times. But why should I believe you anyway?
Do I look like I'm lying?
No, which is why I'm really worried.
Really, would you care to explain why?
I just need to confirm one thing. Smart figure. Were they around my height? Wearing all black?
No, I'd say there were at least a foot or so shorter. And it was more of a dark grey than black.
Oh dear. Oh no. I've made a terrible misjudgment. And it's worse than I thought. What do you mean? I just realised this. The slit of the throat out there, the way that it was done. The knife was at an upper position. I thought that they would have came up behind, but no, they did it in front. Because they were shorter than that train scarf member. So the knife would be pointing upwards. Look, I don't get it. What does this all mean? Well, don't you understand? There are 2 mass murderers on this train.